Hi everybody, it's Michelle Hotchkiss, and a couple days ago I posted this page in the Journaling Bible Community Facebook group, and someone asked me how I drew the flowers, so I figured I would try a quick tutorial on how to draw these flowers. I used a Copic Multiliner SP pen. This is a metal body pen which has refillable ink cartridges and replaceable nibs, which is really great in case you wear out your nib. Instead of throwing the whole pen away and wasting a bunch of ink, you can just replace the nib and keep on going and use it until you run out of ink or need to replace the nib again. Anyway, I'm using the smallest size that I have, which is 0.05. Now this is a very fine line pen, so it works really great to give very fine details. And the way to use this pen, actually, if you use it straight up and down to the paper, you get a more solid flowing line. And if you kind of use it angled at the side, you can actually get a less dark line. And sometimes it skips a little bit, which can be really nice for adding different texture and for shading. Anyway, what I'm doing right now is I'm drawing little circles. This flower is really basic. Anybody can draw little circles. And then I'm going back in and I'm kind of darkening up the edges of the circles. And I'm doing little dots also around the edges to represent the shadows. The whole thing with drawing that makes something go from flat to dimensional is light and shadows. So whenever I'm adding the shadows, I'm creating depth and dimension. Now here I'm drawing the petals, and the petals are just really random, kind of wonky shapes. There's absolutely no perfectionism or anything. I'm just randomly drawing shapes. And in fact, the more perfectionism or perfect you try to get with your petals, the more difficult it is to actually make the flower look dimensional, because I use the odd shapes of the petals to actually help create the shading, the form, and the dimension. Right here I'm adding lines that represent the shape of the flowers. You know, petals are not just flat. They curl up, they protrude towards you, they curl backwards, they bend, and so when I add the lines, I'm actually creating the shape, the form and depth of the petal. And I'm just using really fine light strokes. And what I look for is I usually start at the base of the flower and just kind of start randomly going up towards the top of the petal. But then I also go to the top of the petal and I kind of find where there's a curve or something in the petal. And then I start bringing the strokes downward to meet the center petal. And as you can see, this is what actually forms the dimension in the petal. It makes it go from just a flat outline to something that looks like it recedes or comes toward you, bends backwards. That's all done with shadows and light. So when you're drawing, studying where the light and the shadows are on something and learning how to draw those is really the key to making something look dimensional. Anyway, again, what I really look for is just kind of little wiggles in the line that I drew of the petal, and then I just pick out one of those little wiggles, and if they tend to go down, then that'll mean the petal's kind of going back, so I start bringing pen strokes down from the edge of the petal towards the middle of the petal. I'm sorry, the middle of the flower. And then from the middle of the flower, meaning up to the top of the petal. And I'm just going to let you watch the video here a little bit so you can just see how I do the pen strokes and how those pen strokes just make the dimension and the petal kind of come to life. So I'm going to stop talking, but first I'm going to apologize for all the ravens in the background. They just seem to kind of go crazy when I was doing this video. Don't know why. That's not really normal for them, but you know, that's just the way it is. I did this outside because I have a really inexpensive, otherwise known as cheap, tablet. I don't have a video camera, and it has a very difficult time with the video focusing when the light is not just perfect. Even if the light's perfect, it's just a cheap tablet and the camera is really not very good. So I had to do this outside because I tried it inside a couple times and my camera just would not, or the tablet video camera just would not focus at all. So I moved outside, and so you got road noise and ravens and bugs and things like that. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking at the moment and just let you watch the video. Now, one thing that I want to point out is always start your lines off light. You can always go back in and make things darker, but you can't make things lighter when you're using pen. When I do these flowers, I just start with pen. I don't pre-draw with a pencil or anything at all because they're such a basic shape to start with, just the circles for the center of the flower, and then the kind of wonky shaped petals, and then the rest is just line work. And that's actually the funnest part. You just pick out what you would think are actually imperfections in the line drawing that you did of the petal, and that's where you start bringing your pen strokes in to start making the folds and the ruffles and the ripples that are in the petals. After the petals are all pretty much finished in, then you just kind of sit back and look at it and reevaluate after you've done the entire flower, and then you can determine if you need more darks anywhere. And you'll see later on in the video that I just go back in and I start adding a little bit more darks to certain places in the flower to just kind of help more with definition and separation. You can see when you add your darks, it really brings a lot more contrast to the flower, which gives it more depth and dimension, and it makes it much more interesting. Sometimes people stop a little short, I think, in the contrast area, and they don't get their darks dark enough, and so things just tend to look a little bit faded or just a little bit flat. So don't be too afraid to make your darks darker. Don't go crazy with the darks all over the place, but just in a few select areas, make your darks nice and dark. Right here I've accidentally gone off the screen, but I'm just drawing in a simple stem. And it's just nothing but a couple lines and a little bit of shading. Anyway, so I'm pretty much done with that flower. And I want to show you some examples that I've done with the same flower. This one was watercolored after it was drawn with the pen. This was actually just a sketch that I did, and these ones, the flowers were not painted in, but they're colored in just select spots, select areas with just a marker. This was on watercolor paper.